way the Sabatian Frankists, if you go and see all the history of the people who founded the Mega Group in 1991, these people who are actually, people are talking about Semitic. The problem is the Sabatian Frankist. When in 1933, see, you ever heard of, I mentioned earlier, the Asiatic Brethren. And in this book, of course, you know, when you are doing an interview, it's 90 minutes. We can only scratch the surface. So I have to go through the main things, you know. Now, the way that Les Wexner and his associates work together with B'nai Brit, there is some very powerful people that, do you know the history of B'nai Brit, or do you know about B'nai Brit? Because it's very important to explain what B'nai Brit is. B'nai Brit is the one that before Jeffrey Epstein was put into place to start his operation, created the Banking and Finance Lodge, and they honored a very important guy close to Donald Trump, Roy Cohn, at the State of Israel Bond dinner in 1983. Now, this is not about, this thing like bringing disrepute into the White House or Trump. This book demonstrates that there is no president in the last century, or at least after the Second World War, but even before the Second World War, because, of course, if we go Truman, and there is, since the foundation of the State of Israel, this country is connected. And, of course, even if you are a genius president that wants to renew everything, wants to create everything from scratch, and wants to detach from the past, there is no president that can avoid the power of the Sabatian Frankists. They control you. You arrive to a level in which they will tell you, you can't go above this level. And that's why I make it very clear from the introduction of the book. You have read it because you said you read the beginning of the book. I said it very clearly. I understand we can't put the system in jeopardy. That's why we can't reveal everything about Jeffrey Epstein. But this book reveals it. So once you read this book, you understand that there is no Democrat, there's no Republican, there's no party that is free of their control. So, Michael, honestly, this system is rigged. And there's no way out of it. And this book demonstrates it fully. So the honesty that we, as researchers, as people who have a following, and you have many people who are following you today, and I know they always follow you, and you are very honest about your endeavor and about bringing truth. We have to admit when there is a level in which you can't, they will never reveal the truth about Jeffrey Epstein, because the whole United States Congress will come and fall into pieces, and the whole executive branch, the legislative branch, the judiciary branch, they will all come crumbling down. Now, do we want that? Question.
Yes, I want it, to tell you the truth. But, I think that if this was revealed, it would be, not just the Congress and the Senate and the political system that would collapse, but it would be the banking system, everything.
When you go from a book from A to Z, and you get all the names that I'm bringing out, names that nobody talks about, of course.
Yeah.
Names that David Rockefeller defined like the biggest economist ever. And you go and check the name and say, who is this guy? I never heard about that guy. Yeah, but David Rockefeller said he was big. He must be such a big guy. Yeah, but nobody talks about it. Why? Because he's a Sabbatean Frankist. Because revealing maybe this, you see, Prime Minister Israeli said that the world is not really ruled by the people you think they're ruling the world, no? And there is a reason, because otherwise the system will have some very serious problems. So in my book, I really try to bring out this context of hidden people. Like, for example, if I give you a name, I'm going to give you one name here, and you tell me if you ever heard about him. André Benoît Mathieu Mayer, born in 1898, died in 1978. Have you ever heard of him?
Mm-mm.
Now, David Rockefeller defined him the most creative financial genius of our time in the investment banking world. This is what David Rockefeller said. Do you know who he was working with and who he was working for? This Sabbatean Frankist, who was born, of course, and raised in a Sabbatean Frankist family in Paris, ended up, after receiving the Legion d'Honneur and that, coming to the United States. He then became an advisor to the Kennedy family. He also became a close confidant to President Lyndon Johnson. He was called every time they needed him at the Oval Office. He was advisor to Jackie Onassis. He was advisor to people like William S. Paley at CBS, Catherine. You see, nobody knows about him. But I told you know the names he was advising, of course. I mean, the guy was like one phone call away from the White House, close confidant of President Lyndon Johnson, of the Kennedy family in the crucial moments of American politics. And nobody knows who he is. That's how the Sabbatean Frankists play everybody. They don't want to be seen. They are not the ones you see in front of the people, you know. People like Donald Buck don't want to be seen. And you see how similar the little St. James Temple of Jeffrey Epstein and the bathhouse where the Sabbatean Frankists used to meet is.
So that's in Aleppo, Syria.
Yeah.
Wow.
Which was a very important base for the Sabbatean Frankists, because it was also a very important commercial base. You see, for example, Anton LaVey, who founded the Church of Satan, he also had Sabbatean Frankist background. You see that image. Why do you think a pope who will become a saint blesses Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell? Where did this pope come from? Poland. Where does the Sabbatean Frankist come from?
There's a connection. Oh my God.
You see, and so you are basically with all these images, and then you see on top of that image of Jacob Frank with next Robert Maxwell, and they basically look at the same, because the guy thought he was the reincarnation, Robert Maxwell. Robert Maxwell was also a very influential figure in the intelligence services in his connections with KGB. I explained the connections of the Sabbatean Frankists with the Soviet Union, how they were the only ones who were not persecuted during the time in which the Soviet Union was persecuting the Jews with Stalin. The only ones who were untouched were the Sabbatean Frankists. And this is something that, I mean, I learned from my own research in Moscow with people who are Sabbatean. I mean, people who actually I met, like the rabbi or the head rabbi of Moscow and stuff. And in my research, in my book, I explained. They told me, Leo, I said to them clearly, I was outside, I was in the dacha of Putin. I was guested there for one night when I was. working at the Bolshoi doing this special performance. They guested me there one night, and we started to talk. And at one point, Lazar Vinogradsky, who is a dear friend of theirs, who is of course Jewish, and who lives there permanently because the wife is the head of the borders of the border police, like ICE here in the United States. And he told me, and I said to him, "How comes you are, you have no problems?" And he said, "Well, we are treated different because we are the aristocrats." I said, "The aristocrats." And then I thought about it. Jacob Frank nobilitated these people to think of themselves as superior, as aristocrats, not as other Jews. The other Jews are the ones they sent to the concentration camps. They sent to some remote area in Siberia to die. Mm-hmm. So you see that the persecution is then very direct. It's not like simply the worst enemy of the Jew is the Jew. The worst enemy of the Jew is actually a Jew who's gonna send you to a concentration camp or to some kind of gulag because they don't care about you. And why they don't care about you? Because the Sabbatean Frankists, once they brought forward this heresy, whoever didn't agree with them was their enemy. Even if they were Jewish, they didn't care. Actually, if you were Jewish and you were not embracing this heresy, you were, for them, even more cursed than any other. And so you deserve
a lot of the Sabbatean Franks came from Ukraine, Polish area.
Yes,
they're the ones that basically took down the royal family in Russia.
First of all, the Sabbateans came from all over before Sabbatai Zevi made his conversion in 1666. That was the year zero, the millennium year of when he converted to Islam. At that point, the Dome, the Sabbateans, became in charge of a place which is now known as Thessaloniki. You know Thessaloniki? It's like in today's Thessaloniki is Salonika. How you call it? Thessaloniki is let me explain it for the people who maybe don't know a little bit about geography. It's a city in northern Greece, but it was also part of the Ottoman Empire. And it was a very important city that gave birth to some of the most influential banking and merchant families of the Jewish cartel. Wow. And and Thessaloniki became the breeding ground for this heresy. Jacob Frank was brought there when he was a child, and he converted. But first of all, I want to also tell people who are following us, if you think that Zionism was born in Israel, or born before, of course, Israel, because they then brought the people to Israel with people like Theodor Herzl finding the international Zionist movement, you are completely wrong. You know where Zionism was founded? It was founded in England by the Puritans, the same Puritans that came here with the Mayflower.
Oh my God.
And you know that the father of Sabbatai Zevi was Mordecai Zevi, working in Smyrna for the Puritans at the time of Oliver Cromwell. Oliver Cromwell led the Jews back to England after a few centuries they had been kicked out. Well, Oliver Cromwell led the Jews back after he made a deal with this very important Jewish figure who himself was connected to Mordecai Zevi, who was the father of Sabbatai Zevi. So when Sabbatai Zevi launched the idea of all the Jewish tribes going back to Israel, who do you think gave them that idea?
So Oliver Cromwell also took down the English monarchy.
Okay, for those, of course, that is
these guys just come out after the monarchies left and right.
It's very interesting this whole
Yeah.
story, because then you go all the way from all this, and then you come to Prince Andrew, and then you say, what was Prince Andrew grieving the Royal Lodge to Wednesday, Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell? Why is all this happening? Why is now the monarchy having a real big problem in England that might bring the whole Windsor family to collapse?
Disappearing.
Well, people need to understand that the Rothschild were or not nobilitated in England also. They were. They were nobilitated in Vienna. They were nobilitated in England. They were nobilitated, and they nobilitated and then married with Christians. And that is something that only the Sabbatean Frankists will do, because they didn't give a damn about their Jewish roots or their Jewish faith. So it's very important here for people to really realize, I mean, Oliver Cromwell, you're mentioning a very important figure, because Oliver Cromwell basically was in charge of England after a civil war that brought to the beheading of a king.
Yeah.
You know, it was a unique thing in I guess, in English history, that now the leadership of Oliver Cromwell met with a guy called Menasseh ben Israel. Menasseh ben Israel was connected to Mordecai Zevi. And all this is connected. And who was, and why did these Puritans, and of course, including the ones that then went on the Mayflower, came here, made the history of this beautiful country we now live in. So we have to be very careful here. But the thing is that it's all interconnected, because Menasseh ben Israel convinced, he was, together with these Oliver Cromwell's representatives, sent their delegates to Menasseh ben Israel, who was a very important figure. And Menasseh ben Israel had been studying the work of a prominent Jewish French-born figure called Isaac Lapierre. And this guy was a Marranos. Marranos are those Jews who were forced to convert to Catholicism, but were continuing to practice Judaism. This even before the Sabbatean Frankists, okay? Now, this is with Isaac and with these people. It's important to mention these people, because Sabbatai Zevi wasn't simply a product of Judaism. Sabbatai Zevi was a product of Judaism, but also of the Puritans that worked together with the idea that this guy, Menasseh ben Israel, had was, first of all, to convince Oliver Cromwell to bring back the Jews into England, which he managed, but only as a, let's say, temporary phase before sending them back to Israel. These are the roots of Zionism. And the Puritans were very much into bringing the Jews, but not necessarily because they like the Jews. But in the end, the Zionism, which will develop, of course, as we know it later on, also, I mean, further, but the roots are there. And the roots are that we bring them back simply because we need them in order for the Messiah to come back and to arrive to the end times and to the scriptures to manifest. That's it. It's not like it's Oliver Cromwell executes King Charles, and then you have, of course, later on, Oliver Cromwell will be passing on to his son, but that will briefly last, and then they will go back into the monarchy. So that was a brief experiment, but still, the Jews were reaccepted into England.
Came back in, yeah.
Yes.
So were they the funders of the British or English Civil War?
No, what happened was this, that the anticipation of Jews returning to Palestine and making it their national homeland was first heard among self-identified Christian groups in the 1580s, the Puritans. They were the first ones who wanted to bring back, not the Jews. The Jews didn't even have an idea about it at that point. But then the whole thing developed with, of course, the help of Manasseh ben Israel, with the help of other Jews that were like-minded, and that was the basis of what we are calling Zionism. Were these Jews probably also very rich and probably financed Cromwell? Possibly. But there is another important thing here, Michael, that the father of Sabbatai Zevi, who will declare himself Messiah, he started to work for them and became the representative in Smyrna, in Turkey. And so when Sabbatai Zevi was born, he was given by his father these ideas of the Jews going back to Israel, of a Messiah that was required to manifest this whole thing. And so he said, okay, I'm going to be that Messiah. Let me declare myself Messiah. Understand? Now, when you these days talk to the Jews about these things, these are very delicate matters within Judaism, because you're talking about the links that go way back hundreds of years, and these links are not always of the best kind, okay? Because for them, Manasseh ben Israel, who got them to actually go back into England, was known throughout Europe as the ambassador of the Jews. The fact that he was inspirational, though, to the first Sabbateans was then proven by the fact that people close to Oliver Cromwell, when Sabbatai Zevi finally declared himself Messiah, they immediately jumped on board. So there is historical evidence. It's not like I'm making things up here. Everything has historical evidence that I'm talking about and very credible sources. Now, at the same time, Sadler, who was the Cromwell's secretary, was so inspired by the whole thing that he created what is known as British Israelism. You know what British Israelism is? Maybe I have a book here that is actually a very historical book that I should show you. He built the belief that the English were the lost tribe of Israel. Now, this is one of these very rare books about British Israel that was very popular back in the days, you see? The Saxon race as a lost tribe of Israel.
Wow.
Now, and this is an original book from, I think, 1880. I don't have my glasses with me. Yeah, I have them. But yes, here. This book, I think, is from... because British Israelism became very popular until, of course, with DNA, with modern DNA, things got... this is like from 1889, I think. See?
Wow.
Now, and this copy, by the way, is even more rare copy because it's from the library of a very famous guy who was Alfred Korzybski, another guy, very important guy. I have my rare books, so you know that I'm like very fond of my rare books. So, but British Israelism became inspirational, especially within Freemasonry. Up until still now, there is British Freemasons and Rosicrucians who believe that England is the lost tribe of Israel. This gives an extra amount of confidence. And of course, we have to understand the importance that England has in the constitution of modern Israel, because before Israel was founded, who was in charge? England. And before them, the Ottoman Empire, which they, of course, sabotaged left, right, and center in order, and it was the actual Sabbateans, the Dommeh. You see, you said that the Jacob Frank, of course, you are very right when you say Frankism was developed in Ukraine, in Austria, in Poland, in all those parts in Europe, no? But then you have the Dommeh, who became more integrated in the course of time, who were in Turkey, in Syria, in the Middle East. Now, the Jews are divided in Sephardi Jews and Ashkenazi. The Ashkenazi are prevalently European. The Sephardi Jews are prevalently Middle Eastern in nature. In fact, you see them also from the way they look. Okay? Now, when Theodor Herzl went to create the Zionist movement, which then will bring the creation of Israel later on with the Balfour Declaration and then all the rest, he found himself with a very divided people, because they were, thanks to the Sabbatean Frankists, there was an increasing number of Jews who were secularized, who didn't want to have anything to do with the Hasidic Jews or with the Sephardi Jews, who were kind of like, they would see, I mean, there were people who were highly insultive of their own people. Franz Kafka, you know, Franz Kafka, of course, is a very important figure. He was of Jewish origin, but he himself once, Franz Kafka, everybody knows as a writer, you know, Franz Kafka is one of the greatest, I think, in the German language, Jewish novelist born in Prague that everybody knows. But he wrote that after watching a ritual of Hasidic Jews, he wrote that these people are like primitive, tribal, they are like Africans or something like that. He said something really racist against the Jews who were still practicing Judaism in the traditional form. So there was a big divide between the more increased secularized Jews. The Illuminati had made the Jews more secularized, the ones that converted, the ones who became less and less religious, the ones that, you know, I explained the birth of Reform Judaism, I explained the birth of liberal. I also explained the birth of the two factions that today rule Israel. Today, Israel is ruled by what used to be the labor Zionist, now it's the Democratic Party, the one that was in the hands of Ehud Barak, who brutally raped Virginia Giuffre in Little St. James, just to give you an idea. Brutally raped St. James, Virginia Giuffre in Little St. James. In that temple we saw.
Right, wow.
And then you have on the other side what is known as the more conservative forces of Judaism. But both the conservative, let me explain you this. The rabbis who understood what was happening with the Sabbatean Frankists and understood that these political movements were in their hands, both the conservative ones as well as the leftist ones, denounced this over and over again. They said, Judaism can be only one, and it's the one that follows the Mosaic laws, the ones that, you know, were delivered to Moses, and we respect. We respect the Torah in its traditional form. We respect Judaism the way it was given to us. Anything that comes, you know, like that is in some way being brought out of that realm is in itself wrong for traditional Jews. Now, what happens is that there were figures like, for example, Zev Jabotinsky. Have you ever heard of this guy? Zev Jabotinsky is a very important guy within Judaism because this guy, Vladimir Zev Jabotinsky, is the guy who created the revisionist Zionist movement, which is today the father of the Likud party, which is the one of Benjamin Netanyahu. Now, the same people who created the Likud party on the right, the Sabbatean Frankists created both the right and the left. So they're all played. There is, like my friend, late friend, is no longer alive, Barry Kamish, used to say, it is the Sabbatean state of Israel. It was created that way. the guy who created it, this guy, this is the Encyclopedia of Zionism, you see?
Yep.
This guy here, who created the whole thing, was this guy here, a journalist, Theodor Herzl, is considered the father of Zionism, and for this reason is considered to be, very important to the whole foundation of Israel. Well, he died before Israel was founded, but what he did was to reunite, to put together those factions of ultra-religious together with the more socialist, leftist, or less religious factions. You see, he had to, like I said earlier, there was a lot of racism between Jews. That racism between Jews was then played later on by the Nazis, because when we see, for example, the typical image of the Jew with the nose, the finger, the classic guy who, like this, well, that was played by the Jews themselves. Theodor Herzl said, and this is stated in his own memoirs, that the best friends for the Jewish cause will be the anti-Semitic people, the anti-Semitic nations, the nations who persecute the Jews will be actually the best friends of the Jews in the making of Israel. He was understanding that by the persecution of the Jews will unite, and then they will be brought to Israel. And that's what happened. The Jews were persecuted in Russia, basically in the early 1905, there was, we had earlier also other pogroms. Russia was persecution. Then you have, of course, the Holocaust. And you have, but Adolf Hitler, and that's why everything I state in my new book is from Jewish sources, so they can't come to me and say, Leo, you're an anti-Semite, because it doesn't work that way. It actually doesn't work that way. I'm going to show you now a couple of documents of great importance for your audience that maybe if I have the possibility, I want to show you here, or at least I think they are very important. Let me show you something here, very, very, very important. You have that, and now I'm going to show you, it's a second, here. Now this image, and you will say, what is this image? This image might not mean anything to normal people, but this image is very important. This is Rabbi Marvin Alterman in the middle, presiding as Chief Justice of a court of 5 members from his Supreme Rabbinical Court, convened in 1976 to excommunicate Henry Kissinger as a Sabbatean Frankist.
Wow.
Henry Kissinger went to Israel and asked, the first thing he asked, you know what it was? A sandwich with pork. But that is nothing. Henry Kissinger was, as we all know, a member of what club? The Bohemian Club. And in my book, I have a whole chapter showing you the roots of the Bohemian Club in Prague and in the Sabbatean Frankist Lodge of the Asiatic Brethren, with receipts and academic sources certified. The Bohemian Club was founded by the Sabbatean Frankists.
Wow.
So this is one document, one thing that I think was important, but now I want to show you another one that might be of importance. And I repeat, this is very important because people will understand things with, when they see. Let me take this off here, and so let me see if I can put it. Let's go back to this. Okay. This is Lex Wexner, the guy who everybody says, how comes he gave the power of attorney to Jeffrey? How is it possible? He gave his own building, the most expensive and luxurious building in New York City, to this guy. What's behind it? Well, Lex Wexner, who later became in charge of the Mega Group, is a Sabatier Frankist. That is, by the way, what you see here, another dedication to Jeffrey for his birthday. We know he liked that kind of style. Mm-hmm. And he gave everything to Jeffrey because Jeffrey was working for him. That's it. Was working not only for him. It's not only a Mossad operation. There was involved Shin Bet, Mossad. There was involved Prime Minister of Israel. But it's not only Israel. This whole operation, that blackmailing operation by using these young women, and of course, the fact that they practice sexual deviance is a classical thing within Sabatier Frankism. So it's not a novelty of sorts. And now I'm going to show you something else. The guy who founded the Ordo Templi Orientis, which today is the organization that, as you know, is the owner of the copyright of Aleister Crowley's writings, and also the secret society that has infiltrated Freemasonry to a great extent, was this gentleman here. And where was he from? He was from Vienna. And in the foundation documents of this new organization, he actually, and this is not a secret because it's in the foundation documents of this organization, he, and it's quite incredible, but he states that the ones that expired him, this guy is called Karl Kerner, is the co-founder of the Ordo Templi Orientis, okay? Just for those who don't know it. Later on, 10 years after the founding, Aleister Crowley, a few years actually after the founding, not even 10 years, Aleister Crowley got approached by Theodor Reuss, the other co-founder, who was also co-founder of the new Illuminati in Germany. He was, in his foundation documents, he said that he was basically inspired and was connected to the Asiatic Brethren, to the Frater Lucis, the Illuminati, who were the ones founded by the cousin of Jacob Frank, Moses Dobruska. So the whole sexual magical Academia Massonica that the Illuminati created there in Vienna was created by the same people who also inspired the Bohemian Club, the Asiatic Brethren, of Moses Dobruska. And Moses Dobruska, who went by various names, by the way, you can find them on Wikipedia. You can put Moses Dobruska, and you will see he has like maybe 3 or 4 names that we know of. Moses Dobruska is a very important guy. So this was the founder of the OTO, okay? While instead, another guy of great importance for our story is Moses Dobruska, because Moses Dobruska, and we can see it very easily, was related directly to Jacob Frank, and not only to Jacob Frank. Watch. Moses Dobruska. Okay. Now, you see, his mother was the first cousin of Jacob Frank, who the reincarnation of the self-proclaimed Zavadai Zevi. Then we go here, and it says, he went also by the name Julius Frey. He was one of the main activists of the Lodge Knights of the St. John Evangelist of Europe. This is the name of the Asiatic Brethren. Read. So that, I mean, it's like we are not making conspiracies here. This is historical evidence. Everything is asserted by historical evidence. And the grandfather, but the thing that people don't know is that the most inspirational text for the Sabatier Frankist, the text that inspired them in their heresies and so on, was written by the grandfather of Moses Dobruschke, who was a guy called Rabbi Eschebutz. And now I'm going to show you this guy, because this guy brings us directly to the biggest controversy in Judaism, at the heart of Judaism. And here is when you have to really be careful, because the Jews, they are kind of like a little particular about their history. Okay? So, Jonathan, this guy here, okay, is particularly influential because he wrote the most influential book on Sabbatai Zevi and their practices, their heretical practices. And as you see here, it says, Eschebutz was a Talmudist, Halachist, Kabbalist, first as Dayan of Prague and later as Rabbi of the Free Communities. That is a big title for the Jews, okay? But then it says here, conflict with Jacob Emden and the Emden-Eschebutz controversy. You just go down here and you see the Ashkenazi issued a ban, excommunication of the Sabbateans, and he was accused of being a Sabbatean. But in my book, I also bring you the evidence, because he was the author of this book called Come This Day Unto the Fountain. And that is the most important book ever for the Sabbatean Frankists to this day. And it's not any kind of book. It's a book where basically King David goes on a mountain and he gets into an homosexual act. So it's pretty far out stuff. I mean, by Jewish standards, you are talking about King David and you're placing him on a mountain, and instead of meeting with his friend, the official version is that King David receives a spy because his son had, waged war against him and all that. This is the history of Israel we are talking about. In the version they give, he gets in an homosexual act with this guy to make sexual magic with God. It's like Aleister Crowley all over again, if you think about it. In fact, Aleister Crowley was inspired by these people. And we have the direct connections of it. And not only this one, these other connections. In my book, I talk about the mentor of Madame Blavatsky, Max Theon, another Polish Sabbatean Frankist. I talk about Ignaz Trebisch Lincoln. Have you ever heard of Ignaz Trebisch Lincoln? This is a character that you need to know about, because this guy, I find this character fascinating, because people don't know anything about them, but they have made the history of mankind behind the scenes. Now, Ignaz Trebisch Lincoln, I want to show you this guy, because this guy went from being a Sabbatean Frankist, an Anglican priest, a Nazi spy, a Chinese habot, a Japanese, all in one life. Okay, and this is a typical example of a Sabbatean man of mystery, like Robert Maxwell, the father of Ghislaine Maxwell. It's not like a unique thing to Robert Maxwell or to Jeffrey Epstein. These characters existed, and not only they existed, they claim to reincarnate. So I'm going to show you now this guy, because this guy has a history. He even got elected, and he wasn't even English, to the English Parliament. Okay, this is one of the images of Trebisch Lincoln.
So this is kind of interesting, because, we think about Jeffrey Epstein as being a Mossad spy and a CIA spy, and
that is secondary.
He's a Sabbatean. It sounds like they're they can transition because they're Sabbatean. They can do it all.
What?
Like this guy.
This is a Sabbatean. What does it say there? It says Trebisch Lincoln as Chao Kung.
Chao Kung.
Yes. What the heck? And not only.
He's got a serious face on too.
What's here? The chief of Gestapo in the Far East, SS Colin Joseph Erzsébet the scheme received. He proclaimed himself also as the new Dalai Lama, but this was only the second part of his life. He had another part of his life in which he actually met Adolf Hitler, and he was with here, in his capacity, he met Adolf Hitler. And he actually was involved in the coup that brought Hitler to power after.
Wow.
And before that, he was actually, before that, he was in the SRIA in England. He was involved with the Bishop of Canterbury, and he was an Anglican priest in England. And not only that, you see here, Anglican, Church of England. And on top of that, he was also elected in England he won. He became a representative of the English Parliament, a liberal candidate. I mean, you can't make these things up. I mean, these people are. Beyond the fact that they are evil, they are geniuses of evil. And because they're international men of mystery, spies, do everything and anything. They are everything and the contrary of everything. In the end, this guy, Trebitsch Lincoln, got killed while he was a Habot simply because he threatened Hitler to reveal the truth about him. And so the Japanese who were occupying that part of China, they had him killed. You can't threaten Hitler during the Second World War. He was very powerful. And this guy had the courage to threaten Adolf Hitler. And he was a Sabbatean prank. And Adolf Hitler, like my book reveals, for those who don't know, and these are not my words, of course, because otherwise the Jews will say, Rabbi Margan. Adolf Hitler was conceived in 1888 in a Sabbatean Frankist ritual. That's it.
Wow. So these guys, if you go against them, you like you talk about in your introduction, there's like dozens of people that have mysteriously died. The latest, Virginia Giuffre. So she committed suicide. We know she didn't commit suicide.
Yeah, sure, she committed.
Yeah.
Okay, so everybody commits suicide. By the way, I'm alive and kicking. I'm not committing suicide. Just so you know, everybody knows.
You need a bodyguard, yes, but I don't know if I could save you. So, geez.
No, the thing is this, let's say this. I have been within this world, and that's why I'm bringing you out this truth, okay? I know how deep it goes. They know who I am and how, let's say, fearless I am. But in the end, life, it's, I'm not afraid of death. That is the main thing. Okay, let's make
another thing that keeps you kicking too is because you're constantly revealing. I've learned that. Yes.
Also, maybe, I have a few connections. My cousin was the bodyguard, best friend of Henry Kissinger.
Okay, there you go. You're in the family. You're good.
But let's say that what I revealed has never really gone very well for them. I mean, they are like, oh, what a bad boy. He should stop saying these things. Why doesn't he mind his own business? I remember that time when, and I have a video, but I think they closed down the channel, maybe also for that video. I just got the Black Book of Jeffrey Epstein, and I called Prince Andrew. He answered me.
Wow. Jeez.
Right. But you see, I think one thing here is very clear from this book. Nobody can be above them. And so for this reason, we are just like 2,000 years ago. And anybody who's going to try to go about, to stop them or challenge them will be crucified. That's why I know that Donald J. Trump is not suicidal. And that's why I know that he's like, okay, let's get this thing. You're still talking about Jeffrey Epstein? Yes, we are still talking about Jeffrey Epstein, their president. But what can you do? That's how it is. We are in the year 2025. You can't just simply put this truth under the carpet and hope that it goes away.
Well, your book is definitely going to help us see this information. But like you said, no one can be above them, or no one can suppress them, because they will suppress you. So you can know them for their misdeeds and so forth, but you can't do anything about it. Sounds like.
Well, when you go through all the, like B'nai Brit, maybe we can end by talking about B'nai Brit, because I think B'nai Brit is, they're the founders of the Anti-Defamation League. So they're the ones who really control the narrative here, no? Mm-hmm. So B'nai Brit is something that we should maybe discuss before the end of this show, because the foundation of B'nai Brit, it's, apart from the fact that the words B'nai Brit, what does it mean? When you go through the real meaning of it, and Rabbi Anterman was very, very careful about, he said, it means Sabbatai is my illumination. Now, the B'nai Brit is the most powerful organization, in Jewish Masonic organization in the world. There is no other organization like B'nai Brit. And B'nai Brit is the one that, of course, some people might fear, because, they are committed to the security and continuity of the Jewish people and the state of Israel, and combating anti-Semitism. But I made it very clear here. B'nai Brit was founded by German Jews who, after the experience of the Asiatic Brethren, German Freemasonry didn't want to welcome the Jews in their lodges. There were certain lodges who in the end ended up under the obedience of the United Grand Lodge of England, because they couldn't find any lodges in Germany that would let Jews in. There was a lot of racism against Jews, and this is very bad. There was a lot of anti-Semitism. So they came to New York, and in October 1843, they founded this organization. It was 12 of them, a bit, I think, they wanted to create something where the Jews could join and not feel left out. The problem is that all these organizations, including B'nai Brit, and what happened with the Reform Judaism and with Liberal Judaism, is that they are basically deciding which of the Mosaic laws they can obey and which they can disregard. And I would like to remind those Jews that Moses will kick their asses from here to Mount Sinai. Either you obey them or you disregard them altogether. There is no compromise. Oh, this one yes, this one no. Maybe we can, And when when you see like the terrible acts that were committed by these powerful people, and Jeffrey Epstein was constructed by these people, was a construct of these people. He wasn't the ultimate, supreme manipulator. He was the guy who understood the certain things. And in fact, in my book, I also explain the similarities with the Dr. Frankenstein of Mary Shelley, because he himself was involved in the creation of Sophia the robot. Sophia the robot is today, with the Hanson Robotics behind it and the AI that is driven, one of the most complex robots in the world. And we have the evidence that the financing for the AI that drives Sophia was by Jeffrey Epstein.
Wow.
Jeffrey Epstein was also a scientist. Jeffrey Epstein wasn't just simply the ignorant guy who, or the manipulator or the blackmailer. Jeffrey Epstein was also a scientist, a mathematician of sorts, an expert on AI of the ultimate kind. He was a friend of Peter Thiel. And Peter Thiel comes from his family from Frankfurt, even if he's Christian, with an old link to the Sabbatean Frankists.
Thiel, Sabbatean Frankists too?
He is from a family in Frankfurt.
Wow. Okay, that explains a lot too. Wow, he's like bombshells tonight. Oh my God.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you read this book, it's one bombshell after the other. So at the end of the book, you're like, oh my God. So I hope that this book
I hope
continues.
I get to write another book. Yeah.
But I think that the idea is that Jeffrey Epstein was also a mad scientist. So the concept of the Frankenstein comes from the concept of the golem. And I start my book actually talking about the golem concept in Judaism, which was this creature created with these magical formulas within Judaism. You see it there. No, go back to see there on the left. That is go on the left there. That is the creation, the original creation by the rabbi in Prague, the rabbi who actually created the golem. And the golem was created in reality to defend the Jewish community, and the golem was the inspiration for then created later on the Rabbi Loew, who lived between 1512 and 1609. He created Rabbi Judah Loew created this monster. And then, of course, on the right, you have Sophia de Robert, with the friend of Jeffrey Epstein, who is the guy who created the software and who is one of the maximum experts of artificial intelligence. So everything is connected here. And then you have on top of that the evolutionary dynamics of Martin Novak, another guy who went many times to Little St. James. So you see, I think that this book, together with the Virginia Giuffre's book, can be really an opening for something that can really bring the system to the ground if we want.
So you think her book is relevant and complements her book?
It complements absolutely my book, because that's
I'll have to get it too. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that is the testimony firsthand. She didn't give the names, but the names, like her ghostwriter said, are very easily. She had made some testimonies that were deposited and that you can find on Google very easily. Ehud Barak, for example, is the prime minister she talked about that violently raped her. You don't have it written on the book simply because she wanted to avoid legal challenges, but because she deposited the testimony with the FBI, I think there is no problem in going and getting those testimonies. I mean, in the end, we are all expecting these Epstein files to be revealed, but I said from the start they will never be fully revealed. But a lot of what has already been revealed, if you start summing 1 + 1 = 2, gives you the result that you get what you want if you start searching. But of course, nobody could offer you what I offer in this book, which is a religious, cultural, anthropological background of all the characters. So you finally realize, oh wow, this guy came from this family, this other guy comes from this family, this other guy comes from this family. What is Steven Spielberg doing with Les Wexner in a secret meeting? What are they doing behind the scenes? B'nai Brit created not only a financial lodge, created a number of lodges in Hollywood. They directed the narrative of Hollywood. The Sabbatean Frankists, as you know, which I exposed in volume 8 of my Confessions, have directed since the beginning the narrative of Hollywood. So I think that I hope, I know, listen, Michael, I want to be very sincere. You are the only guy who is giving me the possibility of talking about my book. Up until now, very few people are having the courage to invite me on the shows.
I didn't know at first. Now I'm committed now, I guess, but no, I love your work, and I love exposing this information. Yeah, we've talked about this in some of your other work, and this is more comprehensive, obviously, and puts it all together. Wow. And we didn't really go down some of the dark roads. I kind of alluded to some of them, but it's probably better we don't go down them.
You
But,
can find them on, you find them on the book. I mean,
yeah, you start to read this book, guys, you're going to see some crazy stuff. Now, somebody in the chat said that the Sophia robot looks like Virginia, and I agree. When Virginia was a little girl, was basically 12 years old or however old she was when Jeffrey Epstein was sporting her around.
it's possible, sure.
Yeah.
Sure. The fact that after, when the robot was launched in 2016, they publicly said, it doesn't have nothing to do with it. But then, the evidence is there. He founded the AI for the actual, software for the robot. And he had announced the birth of Sophia the robot 3 years before it was announced publicly with the name Sophia. So, I mean, Hanson Robotics is also, really typical of those people who, like I said in my book, once Epstein was suddenly compromised, they soon, deflected and said, "Oh, we don't know him. We don't want to, But the truth is there. I mean, in this day and age, you can't escape the information background behind Epstein and all the links. They're there and they're proven already. And like I said, I think it's complementary to the work of Virginia, because Virginia has been a victim. And of course, she's been eliminated. And I'm convinced that she's been suicided, just like everybody else. And aside from, Jean-Luc Brunel, who gave him more than 1,000 girls, aside from Ghislaine Maxwell and himself, nobody else has been arrested. And that really explains you the power of these people. They are above the law. And it's really sad that the whole of the Western world, the judiciary, is compromised.
Wow. Stunning work, Leo. And thanks so much for coming out and revealing this. Because so many people have been stuck on this. Why? And this, you've answered it to a great extent.
Yeah, no, once the question was always recurring for years. And, it's always like the journalist that usually does this kind of work is always like, oh, well, but then there is the intelligence involved, there is elite people involved, and we cannot really understand what they are doing. And so, it always kind of stops. And you can't really dig deeper. And I wanted to instead reveal what is behind this whole thing, because I don't have, I'm not the New York Times journalist or the guy who has maybe a